Shalom, everyone. Good evening from Jerusalem and Boker Tov. Good morning, wherever you are. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. This is a real pleasure for me, and that was a beautiful dedication for Francesca Baruch. That's very, very inspiring. I myself was inspired by her work, being a graphic designer and a typographer, working with typography and with letters. Francesca Baruch is definitely an inspiration. So that was a beautiful surprise to hear as we open. I will take us through a journey, my personal journey as a designer who works a lot with Jewish and Israeli identity. And through that personal journey, I'll show you, we'll share some case studies and some work that we've done here at the studio here in Jerusalem to kind of explore what I like to call the potential of a renewal and a renewing Jewish Israeli visual language. We're used to seeing Jewish art as certain things. What comes to mind usually is Judaica, maybe illuminated manuscripts, sometimes mosaics. And here we're going to try to explore as I said, the potential of finding different ways to tell Jewish and Israeli stories in a fresh, contemporary way, while always respecting those wonderful, great works of art that have been happening for millennia. I apologize for two things. A, for being hoarse. That just happened today. I lost my voice a little bit, so I'm going to try to do my best here. That usually doesn't happen. I don't know what that's about. I think it's a little bit the excitement of meeting you. And the second is for my English, that sometimes I lose it after like 4 p.m. local time, and we're 4 hours past that deadline. So sometimes I'll hesitate and look for a word. And so please forgive me for that. So I'm going to share this presentation, and any questions that you have or anything that arises, you can go through Gila, and I'd be glad to answer. I'm kind of an in-person type of guy. So speaking to the screen for close to an hour is a little bit challenging. I like to have a conversation when possible, but we'll do our best with this format that we've all kind of gotten used to. And again, it's amazing to see this community. Our studio has been working with CSP over the past few months, and I've heard so much about this, and just to see the amount of people who are interested in learning and exploring is amazing to me. So here I'm going to share our main presentation. Just kind of nod or thumbs up that you see it. Good, thanks. And we're good to go. So I called our talk here and our meeting here today, Looking Jewish, Reimagining Jewish and Israeli Visual Culture. And I already spoke to that a little bit. Okay. I was born in the United States in 1975. I'm 51 years old. I was born in Saratoga Springs, New York, and then lived in Monsey, New York, and I made what I like to call involuntary aliyah. At age 7.5, my parents took me from this nice suburb of New York City all the way to Arad, a small town in the Israeli Negev in the desert. Then it was about a 2-hour drive to Jerusalem and about a 2.5-hour drive to Tel Aviv, mamash in the middle of the desert. So I had to learn Hebrew very, very quickly. The kids in Arad weren't very tolerant towards a new kid who didn't speak the language at all. So I learned Hebrew very quickly and kind of assimilated through that into Israeli culture and into Israeli society through that experience of four formative years in Arad. And I think that those years as an outsider and as an immigrant had a lot of impact on me as a Jewish person, definitely as an Israeli, and as an artist, as someone who deals with creativity as kind of my way to deal with these the issues that arise through my life. After this is us when we made Aliyah. I'm the middle child. My father is an Orthodox rabbi. My mother, who just celebrated her 80th birthday yesterday. Thank God both of them are here, live here in Jerusalem. And this is us wide-eyed and optimistic in our first few months here in Israel, and it kind of stayed that way most of the time. If we take away the hardships of any immigration, and eventually after those 4 years in Arad, which as I said were very, very formative to me, we my family moved back to Jerusalem. Moved to Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem in the 1990s. And as a son of an Orthodox rabbi, I had began to explore as a teenager my own Jewish identity and trying to figure out for myself if Orthodoxy was the way I felt I wanted to express my Judaism. I went when we came to Yerushalayim, when we came to Jerusalem. It was the first time that I came to a city that really had a lot of cultural opportunities. Israel Museum became a kind of a temple for me to visit and to see art that deals with Jewish identity. And there was this one gallery on King George Street in Jerusalem, if you're familiar, in the center of Jerusalem. It was called Ma'ayanot Gallery, and it was on my walk back from school to my home. And I'm like in junior high school now, like in 7th or 8th grade. And one day I noticed in the window of this gallery works of an artist that I had also seen in Israel Museum. His name was Ivan Schwebel. He usually went only by his last name, Schwebel. Schwebel was an American Israeli artist who peaked in the 80s. And he did something that was both simple and radical, which I always find is a great combination. Something that is kind of almost something that had to be done, but is also radical. And what he did was he had this series of paintings from the Book of Samuel, of scenes from this Book of Samuel, from King David's peak time as king, and he would draw them in 2 layers. The graphite layer that you see here in the background layer was today's Jerusalem, contemporary Jerusalem. This is Jaffa Street. For those of you who maybe have been to Jerusalem and recognize, this is Jaffa Street in the 1980s. You can recognize the stores and the storefronts and the buildings. And then he painted a layer in very, very bright oil paints of a scene from the Book of Samuel of King David. This, for example, as you can see in the title, is David whirls with all his might before the Lord in Zion Square. He always took the actual verse verbatim from the Tanakh, from the Bible. David whirls with all his might before the Lord. That's a verse from the Bible. In Zion Square, which of course is the contemporary square in that place. And to me, it blew my mind. In other words, it's a very simple thing to do, but it was extremely radical. And I realized that the places that I go to get pizza after school were the places that King David walked. And maybe that's obvious, but for a kid, 12 or 13 years old, to see that brought to light artistically, and to have this artist make these tons of these paintings. The scope of these paintings are amazing. And all these different scenes, it was just mind-blowing. And at that time, I kind of realized that something about those layers of contemporary and ancient is a very interesting thing to deal with, both visually and in terms of my identity. That we're always looking backward and we're always looking forward. And the present that we're in is kind of that meeting place of those two. And I think that had a lot of impact. Actually, I know that it had a lot of impact on me. I was very lucky to then study one course at Shaw. It was drawing, and I was terrible. I was a terrible student. He had no patience for bad students. But flash forward in the late 90s, when I went to Bezalel, I actually took one course with him, which to me was kind of a closure. But in high school, I went to a yeshiva high school that did not, to put it lightly, did not encourage the arts. And I kind of put that artistic part of my identity aside. And those 4 years in high school, I really dedicated mainly to learning Torah, to learning Jewish studies. This is the scene in the Beit Midrash, in the hall of study in our yeshiva, which was very different from being in the museum. But I knew, and it started back in Arad as a kid who had to deal with my immigration and not very popular kid. I would draw a lot. And I kind of kept on a little bit, like in the evenings after the yeshiva studies, I would still draw. And I knew that was something I really wanted to pursue. And my mother was a librarian at a college that had a graphic design department. And when I used to visit her at work, and I saw the graphic design work, I said, "Oh, that's really what I want to do," because it both has that artistic, it has the drawing part, it has the visual part, but it also communicates. It also tells the story, the storytelling that now everybody talks about storytelling in design. It's ingrained in Jewish culture. It's really the midrash. It's really the learning of the texts. Um, so this is it from my yeshiva studies. This is the page of the Talmud that I learned from for my senior year exams. And you can see on the side, it's my own handwriting, writing my comments on the Talmud page. And I think this also was a precursor for me wanting to have my own say on top of a canonical text. They're saying this is the canon. This is something that is ostensibly or really holy, but I can say my own thing about it also. Kind of that same feel that I had with Schwebel, where he said, "I'm going to paint King David on today's traffic jam on Jaffa Street. I'm going to write my own, what I have to write on top of the Talmud." After high school, I went to the army, as almost every Israeli young man does, for 3 years in the army. And after that, I enrolled in Bezalel in the graphic design department. So if I showed you first a very dramatic move from a suburb of New York City to Arad, I think another dramatic move that I had was from this yeshiva environment that was also only male. No women study with us, to a very religious environment, to a very secular environment in Bezalel, co-ed, and this was my class at Bezalel. And that again was kind of my exploration of Israeli society and Israeli identity, understanding that there are all these different kinds of identities around me that both have a look back. If we talk about Francesca Baruch, so I usually at this point of my talk, I say I was exploring at Bezalel. I was trying to find out why certain fonts were considered holy fonts, or fonts to be used in holy documents, like in the Sefer Torah, or when you do something that has to do with Torah. Why are certain fonts used? Is there something inherent in the font that makes it holy? Probably not. It's again us infusing those fonts with a certain sensibility. And those were the things I explored in Bezalel, and it culminated at the end of with my thesis at the end of when I graduated. It was a redesign of the Talmud page, and I won't go into the details because the truth is that it wasn't a big, it wasn't that much of an amazing project in terms not for Talmud learners, and not in the design world, but for me. It was a culmination of that conversation, or was it actually the moment that I realized that this is what I really wanted to do in my career as a designer, was to take these ancient texts and these ancient cultural treasures and infuse them with contemporary sensibilities as a fresh graduate of what would be considered the cutting edge school of design in Israel. Now, it's important for me to say I wasn't the only person who ever did this. I wasn't the first person necessarily to do this, but I was in the right place at the right time, kind of a Forrest Gump of Israeli Jewish visual arts. At the beginning of the 2000s was kind of a time in Israel where, if before then, everything artistic and everything cultural was very much part of the secular Israeli world, and the religious community had like their own little pockets of that. They had like their own TV slot, or they had separate schools. Something in the beginning of the 2000s, maybe after the Rabin assassination in '95, where secular Jews were getting more into learning about Jewish sources, maybe something about the globalization. Things were happening there, and I was kind of at the right place at the right time. And a lot of organizations that dealt with Jewish content, programs, projects that dealt with those kinds of things started surfacing towards me. They heard that there's this guy who just graduated Bezalel who really loves to design these types of things. And when they were looking for something that didn't look like the bar mitzvah books that I got in 1988, but had a fresher look to them, so I found people turning to me. And that's how this business, this studio, my studio, and my work actually grew. I started out as a solo designer right out of school. And these places that you're seeing here now are this is the one on the left is a Jewish music festival. Nothing here is exactly, was going to be hung in a museum of design. But back then, to take a Jewish music festival for not to look too Jewish was kind of a breath of fresh air for a lot of organizations that dealt with it. If this middle one, and excuse the Hebrew, these aren't translated. Most of the other stuff afterwards is. If this is a series of lessons about the Messiah, about Mashiach, so usually that would be like the visual would be something with kind of Sefer Torah script, maybe a sunrise, and to take the white donkey, which is a reference to the Messiah arriving in Jerusalem, was a little bit of a twist back then when I started out. So the studio grew from just me to now, thank God, in the room behind me here, we have on staff, we have about 12 or 13 designers, animators, and illustrators. And we've expanded from that to a lot of work in all facets of Israeli and Jewish culture, art, and social agendas. So we do web series and branding for these kinds of programs, book covers like the One Day in October, which maybe you've seen. That's really what we do. Just a glance at our clientele, which is kind of a large picture of those kinds of organizations here in Israel. And kind of on a parallel track to all of that, we've developed our own projects of our own. In other words, not 90% of the time we work for hire for clients. One of them now being CSP, and we're very thankful that most of those clients, like CSP, are exactly looking for that. In other words, to find a way in, whether it's in graphic design or branding or animation or illustration, a way to express the soul of the organization. But we've also, throughout the years, done projects that we ourselves initiated, or we ourselves, we didn't have a client for. We were the clients. So this is an example early on that I had a friend who said to me, Dov, I'm really having trouble finding Simchat Torah flags that have girls holding the Sefer Torah. My daughter, when she goes to the services on Simchat Torah, she wants to hold the Sefer Torah just like I do. And all the flags that I find in Israel look like the one I'm showing you here now. I wrote here just a short brief on what Simchat Torah flags, for those who maybe are not familiar. It's a custom bag that goes back to the 16th century, where you give children flags for the dancing and the processions that go on during the prayer, the Hakafot, which is when the circular procession on Simchat Torah. And you can see here two boys holding the Torah scrolls, right? Or even here, when the girls and boys are even dancing together, this is like a classic Simchat Torah flag. So the one who's holding the Sefer Torah in the middle is a boy. So my friend Tamar said to me, why don't you design a Simchat Torah flag where girls are holding the Sefer Torah also? So we did just that. And we designed two, what we call the egalitarian Simchat Torah flags, together with my partner in design, Elad Lifshitz. You'll see his name a lot today. He sits in the same room that I do here in the studio when it's not 8:30 in the evening. And as you see here, what we did, very simple, what I said earlier, it's simple but a little radical, especially in the Israeli climate about 20 years ago. It was kind of chutzpah to do this in certain circles, of course. There are always different circles in Israeli society. And it was a big hit. People heard of it. It was really word to mouth. And for us, it was an understanding that there's a lot to be said about how visuals in Jewish and Israeli culture can be renewable and can be have potential to say something about where we should be, or at least what some of us believe where we should be in terms of our Israeli culture. So back then, this is my daughter, who now is just finished her military service. She's 21 here. I think she was about, I don't even know how to say. I think she was about 8. So I was modeling the flags. And my younger daughter, who is now a senior in high school, also doing that. So we have 3 daughters, as Gila mentioned. So I had to have flags for them as well. And it was a great idea. And then we kind of understood that there's potential for this, and it really just to say put it out there, not really business potential is what I'm talking about, but kind of a voice that we wanted to voice in our circles. And we went on to the next idea of the ushpizin, which is the custom. Ushpizin in Aramaic means guests, and the custom of inviting, spiritually inviting, 7 historical figures through the 7 days of Sukkot. And they're all men, because that's the way ancient Jewish customs were. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, and King David. So we did a very simple thing, and we designed the ushpizot to go with the ushpizin. Now, we were not the first people in the world ever to design ushpizot. We heard of a lot of people who had actually done it, like do it yourself. Like they would take famous women and just cut out photos of them and hang them in the sukkah. But what we did take is our sensibilities as contemporary designers and apply that to the idea of ushpizot. So we took, and what we also did is we expanded. We took the kind of classic canonical women that are what you would consider to be parallel to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, like Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel. But we expanded it also to other Jewish female heroes like Deborah and Miriam and Queen Esther. And we expanded it even further to Israeli icons, cultural icons, Naomi Shemer, Golda Meir, and Chana Senesh. And we got to a full set of actually, and Ofra Chaza, the singer, and Leah Goldberg, the poet, and Zelda, the poet. And we actually expanded it to a full pack of 26 women, where we have posters and banners and magnets. It became like a whole merchandise thing. And the nachas that we have from it is getting photos every year from people in their own sukkahs all around the world, sending us the ushpizot. And what I like about it is that we give people the choice. There are people that are kind of in a more conservative, with a small c environment, where they can't kind of handle having ofra chaza in their sukkah, which is fine. So they'll put up the more canonical ones, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. But some are actually looking to be a little more edgy, and they'll put up Yonah Valach, who was a very edgy Israeli poet, or Ahuva Ozer, who was a contemporary. And in that same vein, and we'll get to other types of work in a moment, that same vein, we also approached the Seder plate. The Seder plate, as I'm sure all of you know, in Hebrew, by the way, we call it Ke'arat Seder, which actually Ke'ara is a bowl, especially in contemporary Hebrew, and you'll see in a moment why I say that. So the Seder plate is the focal point of the Passover Seder. It holds those 6 foods, and it symbolizes each symbolizes a different part of the Exodus story. And it occurred to me that there's another bowl in the Jewish culture, and those are the incantation bowls from the 5th to 8th centuries in Mesopotamia that were meant for protection against evil spirits, curses, and the evil eye. They were put upside down in room corners, or under the floors, or under the beds and door frames. And they had this really, really cool look to them. Any designer that sees this really cool illustration is like, we got to do something with this. So we kind of fused those things, but we didn't just fuse them just for fun. There was a real a concept that we had for it. And when I say we, it's Elad and myself. The verse in Exodus says, this is a night of Shimurim, which is a kind of unique word in the biblical text. So it's usually translated, because it's from shamar, which means to keep or to protect. So it's usually translated as watching or protection or vigil. This is a night of shimurim for God, the night of the Seder, of the Exodus, to bring them out of the land of Egypt. That same night is God's. It's a night of shimurim for all the children of Israel throughout the ages. And the Talmud says about that word shimurim, that not only is it a vigil, meaning they kind of stay up all night, it's actually from the word shamar, to protect or to keep. This is a night that is protected and guarded from all kinds of forms of danger and demons and spirits. So to me, these 2 bowls all of a sudden are connecting. The bowl of the incantation bowl, which is for spirits, and the Seder plate, the Seder bowl, which is brought out once a year on that night, that is considered a night that is guarded from these demons. By the way, there's a halachic, a Jewish law that you don't have to say the Shema that we say before we go to bed. On Seder night, you don't have to say all the other prayers after that Shema that usually have that are about protecting from the demons and these creatures, because you're already protected on that night. So what we created is an illustrated bowl that already is not exactly your Seder bowl with or Seder plate with places for the different foods, but it's a celebration of spring, and it's a celebration of Pesach in a kind of, again, with those sensibilities of here and now as contemporary designers. So you have the Knerlach, and you have the Chad Gadya, the little kid, and just have spring motifs, and that's the bowl. Okay, we good up till now? Anybody? Okay, good. I wouldn't want to find out that I was on mute all this whole time. Okay, all right, sababa. Similarly, we were commissioned in a project that took place before a Shemitah year. A Shemitah is a cycle. There's a cycle of 7 years where the Torah tells us that the land of Israel has to rest, and the agriculture has to stop for that year. And there are a lot of laws about it, and there are a lot of ways to circumvent it. In modern times, it's almost impossible to really do that. That would be catastrophic for the Israeli economy. And we were asked to do something, a poster or a kind of a project for a Shemitah year. I believe it was in 2015 or 16. And we thought of this ancient Jewish format that's called a Shiviti plaque. Shiviti is from the verse in Psalms, Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, which translates to I am ever mindful of God's presence. Okay, and these plaques that are either sometimes are in synagogues or in books, in prayer books, are hung there to help worshipers focus their minds on God. Shiviti Hashem lenegdi, we're mindful of God. And at that time, I just began to practice mindfulness, and I thought that's really cool that there's a Jewish source or a Jewish text that relates to mindfulness, albeit mindfulness of God, but that's a kind of mindfulness where you have something in front of you that reminds you to take a breath or to be mindful. So we designed this mindfulness Shemitah Shiviti that is a takeoff on, as you can see visually, it's a takeoff on these ancient Shiviti, not ancient. This Shiviti is from the 19th century. This one, of course, right? And we infused it with sayings both in Hebrew and a little bit of English. Don't worry, be happy. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Let it go. That was big. Then Frozen, the movie Frozen was huge at that time. And because the word Shemitah is really about letting go. It's almost a physical tenuah, physical motion of taking something and then dropping it. So we made this Shemitah, and you can see it's kind of in that embroidered look. It's like an enlargement of it, and we even did a car version for it to hang it with the Chamsa on the dashboard to kind of be mindful of whatever it is that you want to be mindful at that moment. Again, based on that ancient format of the Shiviti plaques, or that I would say traditional. If not ancient, then traditional. A few years later, somebody had seen that Shiviti and asked for a different kind of Shiviti. It was actually the Israeli embassy in Canada. They were having a special ceremony for gift exchanging with First Nation indigenous people. And they thought it would be a nice idea to put together a kind of Shiviti that fuses some cultural values from the indigenous culture and the Jewish culture. So we did just that. And this is the what you see here is that Providence Shiviti. We took the idea of Providence, which was very, very big in that specific First Nation culture, and we put both verses and sayings that have to do with indigenous culture, also a few hints of Canadian culture, the maple leaf, the flora and fauna of that area of Canada that it relates to. And you see here, this is the Israeli ambassador giving that Providence Shiviti as a gift to the First Nation people. And to us, that was really blew our minds to have something like that travel from Jerusalem to a completely different cultural setting and environment. And you'll see, and towards the end, so we also try to see where we can connect to other cultures. And I think there's a lot of that's interesting in what Israeli and Jewish culture visuals can do as well. Our bread and butter, and here literally our bread and butter, is graphic design work and branding work. And most of the things that we do are for, as I said, Jewish Israeli organizations, kind of NGOs, and they work with education and with culture. But once in a while, we'll have a project that's more commercial. But even then, we're usually approached when it's something that has some kind of roots in a Jewish concept. So we were approached by a bakery in Gush Etzion, near Jerusalem. That concept was that it uses only products, at least that's how it started, only ingredients that were available in biblical times. To keep it very, very simple, very basic. And they called it Pat Bamelach, which is actually taken from the Tractate of Fathers, Pirkei Avot, where one of the things that are said there, in life you should eat bread with salt. In other words, keep it simple. It encourages us to embrace simplicity and modesty, reminding us that meaningful life is shaped not by material abundance, but by dedication to learning, purpose, and spiritual growth. And that's what they wanted to call their bakery. That's actually, we actually brought the naming to this branding also. So there was a name that we thought of. We offered them some names, and this was the name they took. And here it says Kemach, Mayim, and Melach, which is flour, water, and salt. This is David Katz. He was the owner of the bakery. You can see we also printed an apron for him that says "Can't talk, just washed." For those of you who know that, because it's customary, if you're washing the hands before you eat bread, it's customary not to talk until you actually eat the bread. So there's also a lot of humor that goes into these projects. So this is the bakery and the design and the visual language that we created for it. And you can see it goes through the packaging. And here was like an infographic that we did about bread in Jewish and Israeli culture. We also took another saying from Pirkei Avot, from the Tractate of Fathers: if there's no flour, there's no Torah. We thought that was pretty cool for T-shirts and merchandise for the bakery. That also has that idea that spirituality and physical material stability go together. But what I want to show you here is something different, and that's actually what we do in our animation department here, and that speaks to the storytelling that we do. And I want to show you it's not that short; it's about 3 minutes. We'll see if we maybe cut it a little short, of a animation production that we did. It's actually stop motion animation about that Pat Bamelach commissioned from us to tell the story of bread, of rain and ingrain in Jewish culture. So let me just stop the share here, and instead of that, share this. No, wait a second before I do that. Just want to show I clicked what I have to click. Yeah, okay. So we're gonna watch this, and just like, again, like thumbs up that it's seeable, that it's yeah. No, that's not it. There we go. It's this. Okay. You see this bakery type thing? Yeah, you see this bakery type environment, right? With okay, great. Oops. Okay. Can you hear?
Welcome to Pat Bamelach. Today we're going to talk about rain and grain. This is 1 year. We've got summer, winter, spring, and fall. The Shalosh Regalim, the 3 major Jewish holidays, fall nicely on our timeline. We start with Sukkot in the fall, Pesach in the spring, and Shavuot in the beginning of the summer. But in addition, these Jewish holidays are given other names in the Torah, reflecting the planting and harvesting seasons. Sukkot is celebrated between the summer and fall when the harvest season has come to an end, hence its name, Chag HaAsif. The sukkah represents the hut used by the farmer as he would sleep out in his field, harvesting during the day and guarding his produce overnight. As we are done harvesting, we look back with gratitude and look forward to what we hope for in the upcoming year. Right after Sukkot, we begin the tefillah of Mashiv Haruach Umorid Hagashem, where we ask God for rain, and then we wait, and wait, and wait, and wait throughout a long winter. We hope the earth is getting drenched with water and that the grain begins to germinate underground. In pagan societies, people were so afraid that the grain wouldn't grow. They feared that ghosts and goblins would eat up the grain underground. So farmers would dress up as scarecrows or as even scarier ghosts to scare away anything interfering with the crops. That night became known as Halloween. As winter ends, the grain literally springs out of the ground, hence the name of the season, spring. It is at this point of the year that we celebrate Pesach. Aside from the Seder, there are two important events that take place on Pesach. The day before Pesach, we need to take all of our chametz, also known as seor, or basically all bread from last year's harvest, and get rid of it. On the first day of Pesach, Jews would go out, start the new harvest season by harvesting some of the freshly sprouted grain. They would take that grain and bring it as a korban, an offering, in the Beit HaMikdash, the temple. This is called the Korban HaOmer. Once the korban was brought, Jews counted 50 days until Shavuot. At this point, on day 50, the grain had dried out in the fields and is ready to be milled into flour. On Shavuot, the first 2 loaves of sourdough bread are brought to the Beit HaMikdash in thanks for a successful harvest. The harvest continues until Sukkot, where the cycle starts over again. So really, Sukkot is about rain, Pesach is about harvesting grain, and Shavuot is the final product, our first loaves of bread. And that's the story of grain and rain.
Okay, thanks for watching that. Let me go back to our presentation. Okay, so that was another facet, another kind of dimension that we added to our studio early on, which is the ability also to tell stories with motion and not only visually. We're very aware of social issues that arise both in Israel and in the U.S., which we work with a lot of U.S. organizations as well. And here's another. A lot of these are holiday related. So this is another Sukkot job that we did during COVID when we were approached by Olam, which is a social justice global Jewish organization, and they said that people want decorations for their sukkah, kind of like we have the Ushpizot, and that's why it's all black and white, so the kids could color them in. And the idea was a global justice journey through a sukkah of peace and values that deal with social justice throughout as decorations for the sukkah. So each one of these that you'll see here is a different value, where there's both a little bit of a teaching on top, a reflection, and an act that you can do, and a fact. Again, people were sheltering in place, were isolated, and it was a printable at home. So that agility, that ability to do something that is do it yourself was key at that time. So it was about food security and humility. As you can see, like the design and the graphics, we tried to be, again, those kind of contemporary sensibilities that we try to bring to these types of projects, about peace and shelter. And now I'm going to get to your area of the world. We were also approached about 2 years ago by Hamakom in the San Fernando Valley. Am I saying that correctly? I think so. In California, to rebrand their community, their synagogue, their community, and it was actually a merging of 2 communities, and it was going to be called Hamakom, the place. So this is again where we bring what we call the midrash, the thinking in terms of the essence of it, and try to bring it visually. So there were 2 synagogues or 2 communities. One was called Shomrei Torah and one was called Temple Aliyah, that were coming together. So bringing these two communities together, and you see how visually we're representing this with these two circles, bringing these communities together to create a center of Jewish life. So you can see we kind of cut those circles graphically and created a valley because the communities are in the valley with a form that brings to mind both the Ten Commandments and an M for Makom. So this became this is the design of their logo or the logo type. And we took the visuals of the San Fernando Valley and even the color palette that we found to represent those places as a makom, as a place. And we turned those into patterns as well. And their branding, their visual language that they use now is based on that form of the M, which is those two communities coming together in the valley. And illustration supplemented by illustrations that we do here in the studio in that color palette and kind of that vibrant feel that we like to bring to these projects that we do. So even the things like the Bolathon fundraiser are brought to life in that way. And this is how it looks on the other collateral of it. These would be the matches for the Shabbat Shalom, for the Shabbat candles. These are photos that we just got recently from their new place where they use that branding. We've done that also for other educational enterprises like the Beit Rabban School in New York City, which is a kind of post-denominational school. So again, we try to go to the essence of what Beit Rabban is. What is Beit Rabban? It comes from a saying in the Talmud where Ein ha'olam mitkayem ela bishvil hevel tinokot shel Beit Rabban. The world only exists for the breath of young children. So it's the breath and also the talking. Hevel peh means usually the breath, but also the spirit of speaking. So we use these talking bubbles as the main element in the branding, in their logo, and the tagline Jewish Education Reimagined. And then these talking bubbles, this Hevel Peh of Beit Rabban, this breath can be used both as icons on the website and put together a heart for the I Love Beit Rabban. We did a similar project for, not similar, but something along those lines for SAR, another school in New York, whose main idea is that it's a school without walls. It's all open spaces, which back in the 80s when they started was extremely, extremely innovative. So we went to the sources and looked for things that have to do with openness. And there's again, in the Pirkei Avot, in the Tractate of Fathers, there's a saying, make your home wide open. So we created a visual language where all the forms and all the letters are open-ended. None of them actually close to represent the inner architecture of the school. And that became a full visual language, both for merchandise, for you name it. And this also was pre-COVID. And then in COVID, this was actually a photo. SAR was one of the first schools that reopened. It was one of the first that closed down for COVID, and one of the first that reopened. This is actually a photograph from the New York Times where they featured the school as a reopen with our design of taking this visual language, this branding, and applying it to the entire school. And up to this day, they use these Hebrew letters that we created for them from that branding to create a mezuzah when they opened the new classroom, and even for the Shana Tova blessings. I'm going to move ahead here because I want to show you. Gila, do we have questions or not so much?
There's a question about your design. Sorry, I'll just take off the spotlight. About your color palette with the Shviti, and compared to some of I see in your projects it's more colorful like this one, but in your own designs it was more primary. So how do you decide on what influences the color palette?
That's an excellent question. I actually tend to use very muted palettes from my own work. You'll see in a moment this project about Minyan. It's black and white, and when I don't know, somehow when we do the projects for our clients, they seem the vibrant colors, the more colorful. I don't know what that is exactly. I think it's a designer thing that it's sort of hard. It's almost hard to. There's so many options that I end up making it minimizing. I usually minimize the palette for our own work. And you can see that here in this piece. This is also a piece that wasn't commissioned, but it was for a project that had to do with Jewish pluralism. And I thought about the minyan, 10 people that convene in order to start certain prayers. In Orthodox Jewry, where I grew up, it was 10 men over the age of 13, which I always found to be very selective. And as a kid in Arad, who was very much an outsider and never selected to play soccer, I was always the last kid to be chosen. That choosing of the 10 people that are only men and only above 13 kind of hit me as something that I want to explore, maybe to address through my art. So what I did was I took this verse, that has 10 words in it, that is used colloquially in Jewish practice, not as a law, but just as a device to count the people as they assemble for a minyan. As you may know, there's a thing in Jewish culture not to count people by numbers. It's the evil eye issue. So we count them using this verse. So you'll see sometimes when people assemble for a minyan, the gabbai, or the person who's trying to get the minyan together, will kind of point out to people and say, until he gets to 10. And when there's 10, and again, in an Orthodox environment, it's always 10 men above the age of 13, then they'll start the prayer. But I assembled in an alternative minyan, a minyan of people who some meet that criteria, but some don't. So there are women here, and this is my daughter who's now 23. This is a college student. This guy went bald since then. This is an alternative minyan of 10 people who wouldn't qualify for a Orthodox minyan, and they're holding the signs like in a mugshot. Instead of the numbers, they're holding the words, and together they assemble a minyan that, especially because the verse itself is so inclusive. The verse says, let me just go back to the translation: deliver and bless your very own people, tend them and sustain them forever. That doesn't make a division between age, gender. That's about everybody. So counting the people and selecting them for a minyan by excluding people, I found very difficult. So what I did is trying to offer kind of a correction or a tikkun for that. But I called the piece, "Do we have a minyan?" Because colloquially, when you're assembling that minyan, people start asking each other, "Do we have a minyan? Do we have a minyan?" Because nobody's really counting. I'm taking that question from a small question of "Do we have a minyan?" to a larger question: does this constitute a minyan? My father, an Orthodox rabbi, would say, "These are wonderful people. We'd love to have them over for Shabbat, but it's not a minyan. I can't say kedusha, or I can't say baruch hu, certain prayers that aren't said without a minyan. I can't say in this type of minyan." Other people would say, this is definitely minyan, no problem. And those are the questions that I like to ask through the projects that I do. This is actually now part of the collection of the Art Museum in Ein Harod. Besides my graphic design business, I also have been blessed to show and exhibit in museums and galleries, mainly Jewish related around the world, as Gila so nicely said earlier. Okay, so talking about inclusion and exclusion, I wanted to show you another animation that we did. This is about 2 years ago for a wonderful organization called JQY, which stands for Jewish Queer Youth. And let me stop the share here and share that. It's based on an actual issue that arose in Yeshiva University about, maybe you saw this, maybe you read about it in the press a few years back, about LBGT students at YU, at Yeshiva University, wanted to start a club, and they weren't allowed to do it. I think later the court mandated that they did have to. I'm not 100% sure. And we were asked by JQY to put together a animated short dealing with this issue. So let me share it right now. Oh, no, that's not it. 1 second. This is it.
Rabbi Greenbox has to make a tough decision regarding these wonderful kids in his yeshiva. Let's start at the beginning. Goldie Cohn, Saphir Oval, and Pinky Circleberg all go to the same yeshiva. While they may all be different shapes and colors, and have different opinions about politics, sports, and cheesecake, they have one thing in common. They are all queer. Goldie identifies as asexual and often feels alone when her friends talk about dating and crushes. Saphir thinks they may be trans and could use help with talking about their gender identity with their parents. Pinky is gay and struggles with finding self-worth in the parts of him that are often put down by others. Each of them can understand what the other is dealing with in ways that their friends who are not queer simply do not. Their shared queer identity is not based on any of their desires or gender expression, which are all very different. It is based on the unique experience of what it feels like to not fit into the assumptions that are often made about most people. Feeling different in similar ways can bring people together in surprising ways. Ever noticed how casual acquaintances from your hometown can feel like best friends when you meet them in faraway places? Or how good it feels to meet other Jewish people somewhere you thought you were one of the only ones? Goldie, Saphir, and Pinky feel like more than friends. They feel like family. They are thrilled to find out that the symbol for this colorful queer family is the rainbow flag. It helps them connect to people just like them throughout the entire world. So they decide to ask their principal, Rabbi Greenbox, if they can have an official rainbow club in school. Why? Because they have so much to talk about together and feel a sense of warmth, safety, and pride every time they meet. They also want the other queer students in yeshiva to know that they too are not alone and can join in this special community. Guided by Torah values, how do you think Rabbi Greenbox should respond?
Okay. I think I'm going to stop here to see if there are any other questions because we have 4 minutes and I do not like to steal anybody's time. So let me know.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Do these personal projects that you take on cost you at all when you're trying to get larger clients?
Why would I need a clarification there? Why would the personal projects
Because of the religious or political lines that they are crossing.
Okay, so yeah, I'm kind of stuck in the middle of two communities, and I've learned to embrace that. In other words, for the Orthodox community, we're too edgy most of the time. Although, because of I didn't express this enough, but my personal love for all of this is immense. In other words, this is my mother tongue. This is the language that I speak, is Jewish culture. So I feel at home and I feel very comfortable in a large, I wouldn't say the entire spectrum, but I feel very comfortable. We're still approached by quite Orthodox and conservative with a small c organizations. But we have been, Facebook comments, don't work with those guys. He works with the Reform. Israel is it's crazy. Everywhere it's crazy. So we get that a lot. But also, and I must say this also, from the ultra cool design scene, I'm a little bit the religious kid still. So it works both ways. I'm like, in Hebrew they say the dos, which is like a pejorative for dati, for religious. So I'm like the religious kid. I'm in Jerusalem while all my friends are in Tel Aviv doing their thing, and I embrace it. I love it. This is my playground. Both the material and the locale is my playground, and that's why I love what I do, and I'm so passionate about it. I get up every morning at 4:30 a.m. I'm here in the studio at 5:15. That's why I'm pretty zonked at this hour of the day. And I'm extremely passionate about it. I'm doing this for close to 25 years. Baruch Hashem, chamsa chamsa. Because I still feel that there's so much to do in this area. So I embrace the fact, and I've kind of accepted the fact that I'll never be the cool Tel Avivi designer, and that some people will say that I'm too cool, or too edgy. I don't know if I'm too cool, but I'm too edgy. So I'm kind of my friend Devora, actually, who runs we became friends, who runs the bakery, once said, "You're a subversive nerd." Which I think is kind of what I am. And I think that I embrace. I love being a nerd, and I love being just a little bit subversive about it. And that's really what we're about here, what I'm about at least. Did that answer? Yeah. Okay.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Should we continue with more questions, or because we have quite a few, or are you
okay. I'm
want
fine.
to continue with your presentation?
No, I'm done.
Okay, great. What do you think it's about the Hebrew alphabet that lends itself to being the basis for a vibrant design community, making many typefaces, and graphic design also as a vibrant aspect of art?
Okay, that's an excellent question. I don't have enough deep knowledge of typography in the deep sense to answer that scientifically. But I'll tell you what it is to design in Hebrew for over 25 years. First of all, it's wonderful. But I will tell you that all designers, especially when they're students and they're very chutzpahdik, always say, "Oh, it's so much easier to design with English letters." Something about the flow. I just think it has to do with that there's a lot more history of fonts. Not that the Hebrew language is ancient, but in terms of typography, in terms of creating fonts, I think there's a little more mileage in English or English characters. But there's an amazing renaissance and bloom of Israeli fonts over the past 15, 20 years. It used to be like one company that did it. Now there are tons of people that do it. It's never ending. I think that's true about all typography. There is something in those letters, and again, I think, to be honest, that it's more about what they symbolize. I think it's hard to separate the physicality of them. I'm not into Kabbalah, so I don't know. There are a lot of things about the actual physicality of the letters and their shape that have special sgulot, that have special qualities. That may be true. I'm looking at it more just as a designer. It's always amazing to find. And on the other hand, just like I said before, and I like that to have two sides of the same thing. You always feel that you're one font short of the font that you need for that specific project. It's always like, oh, that one almost works, but if I had one that really worked, it would look better. And I don't know what that's about exactly either. I don't know how to explain that, but I can tell you that after hundreds and hundreds of projects, there's still that thing where you say, there are not enough fonts. I need that one more font. And typefaces is a thing. It's a thing. But Hebrew is just wonderful. My acquisition of the language is a big part of my identity. My ability at age 8, I did not speak a word of spoken Hebrew. I just knew Sidur and Chumash. But my acquisition of Hebrew to me was a great accomplishment that I cherish, and the fact that I speak and write and design in Hebrew is a gift. Is truly a gift.
And just one more question,
Sure.
And it kind of relates and ties into your Shviti panels. There also seems to be, and I don't know if this is because we are becoming more of a visual culture with television and internet. There was a very stark, and I will just give a disclaimer that this is my question. Did you go to the latest Bezalel exhibition?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
I thought what was a very interesting contrast was that I saw the Isaiah scroll in the Israel Museum, and then I saw that one student, Naamit Levalko, and I'll give it in the follow-up, this visual interpretation of the Isaiah scroll. And it relates to your work as well, giving a visual to these traditional texts, the same with the incantation bowls. what is it about? Is it about modernity that we need to give visuals now to the text, or is it a movement over history, or is it a personal for you kind of journey?
It's a wonderful question, Gila, and I'll try to give it answer this as quickly as possible. First of all, it was amazing. The first thing I said when I went there, and again, I'll preface this with saying that I don't think I was the first of anything or specifically, but the first thing I said to anybody when I went, it was amazing to see how many projects of fresh graduates of Bezalel dealt
had a
with,
religious aspect to
had,
it.
had I would say had Jewish sources as their inspiration or their subject matter. It was amazing. Now, again, I'm saying facts here. I graduated with 60 other people. There was not one other person in my class who did anything remotely, besides using Hebrew as the language. I can't think of one other student who did anything remotely connected in a significant way to Jewish sources. I really felt alone. I probably wasn't alone. I think I was kind of, I'm a product of my time. I just happened to be a little bit early to the game. And I think there's, and I don't know to explain it exactly, but it's important to say that maybe even what I showed here now is almost obvious in some circles that is happening. And it's amazing to see what I saw at Bezalel. It blew my mind, mamash. Why is that happening? I think it's a lot of things. I think it has to do in this, again, this is a little bit of personal hashkafa, and I think that's a little bit that there are less and less other ideologies and sources that this generation feels connected to. So I think people are finding that in their Jewish roots. And by the way, a lot of it wasn't specifically complimentary of the Jewish subject matter. Some people did some really, really edgy stuff. Somebody did about sexual harassment in the Bible. That was very, very hard to watch. There was a lot of stuff, but I think it became what I want to say is that it became a point of reference. It became a more obvious and accessible point of reference than it was 25 years ago when I graduated Bezalel. And I think that the way Israeli society is moving, and I don't think Bezalel students are exactly part of that movement, but is gravitating towards tradition and towards that, and people want to deal with that, want to see what that's about. So I don't have a good answer to that, but I know that when I was doing it, I felt really special, which was good for me at the time. And as always, you find out that you're not really that special that much about anything really. And people, and again, I'll just say, I think I was a product of my time. I was at the beginning of that wave, and it's amazing to see. I'm on the board of something called the Jerusalem Biennale that deals with Jewish contemporary art, and it's wonderful. I'm a founding member of the board. Rami Ozeri brought me into it. He's the head of it. It's a wonderful project, and people are doing amazing things. So that's my long answer to your short question. I'm a rabbi's son.
I think perhaps you don't realize what a visionary you are. Give yourself a bit more credit.
I don't know about visionary, but
no, it's just interesting that there seems to be a movement now.
Yes.
Of engaging with text and giving it a visual. For sure. Component.
No doubt. No doubt.
Well, thank you so much for this presentation. I hope that we can have you back to speak more in depth about this. Sure. And thank you to everybody for participating, for your questions. It was very engaging visually as well as on a intellectual level. So nice to see everybody. Thank you. Dov.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you could always look up our work. It's very easy to find. Just Google my name. It's very easy to find the work of the team and everybody that does great work here. So thank you very much for listening.